Good evening, welcome to tonight's meeting of the North Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Eddie Lavery, the Committee Chairman. I will start by doing the usual administration and then I will talk you through the running order of tonight's meeting. Can I have apologies for absence first, please?
No apologies today, Chairman.
Any declarations of interest in matters coming for tonight's meeting? Nobody? I have minutes of 31st of January. Are they agreed? There are no matters notified in advance or as urgent. The agenda we are taking is the one that was published by the Head of Planning. So that's two items with a petition, items 6 and 7, and item 8, which is a non-petition item. Okay. Tonight's meeting of the Planning Committee is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. The rights to address this meeting are as set out in the Council's Constitution, as summarised in the committee papers, and as I will go through in a moment. This meeting is recorded and broadcast live on the Council's YouTube site. The cameras are angled this way, so anyone sitting in the audience is not visible, but if you address us as a petitioner, you will be heard on the video and seen on the video. Could I ask everybody please to make sure that you have your microphones on when you're speaking and that you speak clearly into them, because otherwise the audio quality on the YouTube gets a little difficult. For all items, members have seen the officer report. The officers will then provide us tonight with a presentation on that report. For those items with a petition, which is the first two items we're taking tonight, petitioners have a right to address this for 5 minutes. Traffic lights run 4 green, last minute runs to amber, and when we get to red I will stop you. If anyone who does address us, members do have the right to ask them questions if they so wish. On any applicant with a petition, the applicant or their agent also has a right to address us, as do ward councillors. I'm aware Councillor Seaman Digby is intending to speak on item 6, and I believe Councillor Bianco could be intending to speak on item 7, although I haven't seen him here yet tonight. The voting members of committee tonight, I only get a vote if everybody else can't make their mind up, basically. So they get to a draw, then I have to decide what I think. Other than that, I don't vote. So starting down on my far right, Councillor Duku, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Graham, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Morgan, and on my left, Councillor Oswald, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Catra. Officer team tonight, Peter Loveday is doing highways, Mandy Malhatra, the major applications manager, is our presenting officer. James Roger, the head of planning, will provide us with advice as required. Liz Pennington, Democratic Services, is our clerk, and Glenn Egan is our legal advisor. That's everybody. So I'm going to proceed straight to item 6, which is on page 5 of the reports, Eastbury Nursing Home, 12 Eastbury Road, Northwood.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the demolition of the existing conservatory and the erection of a single-storey rear extension plus 2 first-floor rear extensions. The application site is Eastbury Nursing Home, located on the eastern side of Eastbury Road in Northwood. The property itself caters for, or is a home that caters for residents who require mental and physical care. I'll take you through the application location or the constraints plan. You'll note that this is the application site, so there is Carry Lodge and Carry Road, and its main frontage on Eastbury Road. These are the ground floor plans, the existing first floor plan and the existing roof plan. So to provide some context, the ground floor plan, the ground floor extension is located in here. The first floor extensions are located in these wings of the building, so in that wing and that wing there. These are the existing elevations and sections. So again, to provide some context, the extensions would be on this wing above here, on one side elevation, and on this area here. These are the proposed ground floor plans, which show the extension in the central area. And on the first floor plan, the darker shading shows the areas which are extensions on both wings, as we just mentioned. These are the proposed elevations and sections. Again, it's not as clear in this image, but there is a bubble annotation just to show that this is the wing extension on one flank elevation, and that's the other. You can very minimally notice the increase in height and the additional roof form on the front elevation here. The application has been refused in the past, and an appeal inspector has dismissed the proposals. We have outlined here the current proposals on the top of these plans, and then the previous proposal which was dismissed by the planning inspectorate. So these are the rear elevations, which show the area here in comparison to here. So this extension here the roof has been redesigned to be slightly lower so that the flank elevation is reduced in depth. So that, sorry, let me go up here. So this length is not as overbearing on the neighbouring property, which was one of the issues raised by the planning inspectorate. This probably more clearly shows what I was trying to demonstrate. So you'll see that the height here was a shallower roof and a larger flank elevation, whereas it's been reconfigured to be more appropriate to the setting. So greater depth to the roof pitch, and then the flank elevation being slightly shallower. You'll also notice from the photos later on that there is a quite dense tree screen between this elevation and the neighbouring property. On the front elevation, there are limited changes, but there is, there was previously a much larger installation here. There are still going to be some stairs which have been tucked more into the proposed development on the current scheme. And this is the other flank elevation abutting the Carew Lodge properties. So there is a significant sized wall which I think, it hasn't been shown on this current proposal. This shows the current flank elevation, whereas this drawing from the previously dismissed scheme does actually show what is, I think, effectively a 3 metre high brick wall between Carew Lodge and the application site. So if that were superimposed here, there would be a limited increase in the height at roof level. We take you through some photos. So that's the front elevation, and that's the existing rear elevation, and that's the juxtaposition of the neighbouring property and the dense tree hedge that I mentioned earlier. So the first floor addition would be here. The ground floor addition would also be here. If I go back one, the first floor addition, which is predominantly set for the main within this roof height, albeit the roof will be increased in height and some dormers, some windows provided. Turning these photos through. So again, that's the separation between the application site and number 14. This is the outrigger which abuts Carew Lodge. There are some, and the existing sheds in the garden. The roof of this site that abuts Carew Lodge. So this white building in the distance is the flank elevation of the Carew Road properties. And that's the existing single-storey extension that will be removed and the new extension provided. So these are the flank elevations of Carew Road properties. It's this one to the rear which would be most impacted upon because the extension is in the distance beyond there, not along this frontage area. There is only really one window at third floor level, and the extension would not go anywhere near the height of that window. That demonstrates that window a little bit more clearly. So that's the window I was referring to. So this is the flank elevation of number 14, which actually has no windows within its flank, and the extension would be to the rear of this section at first floor level. The application is seeking permission for a 2-storey rear... Sorry, wrong application. Uxbridge Nursing Home, as I've mentioned in the past, is a home which caters for mental and physical care. Parking for 7 cars exists to the front of the property, and landscape gardens with high boundary hedging are located to the rear. The site is within a predominantly residential area, albeit this use has been an established use for some time. The application seeks permission for the erection of the rear extension, 2 first-floor extensions, increasing the occupancy of the site from 15 bedrooms to 19 bedrooms, all providing care facility accommodation. The previous planning application was refused and dismissed on the basis of the size and the scale of the proposal, the impact on the neighbouring property, and a poor outlook afforded to the ground floor windows. Whilst the appeal was dismissed by the inspector, it was advised that the outlook from the additional bedrooms would be adequate, the extension would harm the overall character and appearance of the appeal property and fail to preserve or enhance it would not unduly harm the outlook of number 14 Eastbury Road. The council's conservation team have worked extremely hard over the last, through pre-app as well as this application, to find a design that they felt was appropriate and didn't harm the character and appearance of the appeal property or the conservation area, and they've raised no objection to the current proposals. The application is accordingly recommended for approval. Apologies, there's also an addendum item. We did receive an additional letter of representation, which is in the addendum. It doesn't raise anything new, albeit there was a concern that we hadn't considered the density of the scheme, but it wasn't previously a reason for refusal, which was the insinuation that was made in the letter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a petition, Mr. Delphin Pereira. If you'd like to take a seat at the table, if you press the button on the middle of the microphone, it will light up. And that, makes your microphone live. We'll start your timing just as you begin to talk.
So thank you for the opportunity to voice resident opposition to this proposed development, which has already included the submission of multiple objection letters, a petition, objections from 2 ward councillors, Mrs. Scott Seaman Digby and Richard Lewis, objection from the Residents Association, and a formal complaint that we lodged yesterday. You should have all received an objection pack by registered post, and we've also pasted a few slides in front of you to guide the conversation. I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to focus on a couple of the key issues that broadly fall into 3 categories, and we trust that you will agree that this merits the overturning of the recommendation for approval. Number 1, over-intensification of use and visual amenity. Number 2, issues in the planning process and report. And number 3, ongoing answering questions, some dating back 6 months. So firstly, over-intensification. I would like to remind the panel of the 1988 ruling where the Director of Planning determined that the site was at full development potential. Any further development would affect the residential amenity of neighbours. There is no reference to this in the planning report. There's been refusal after refusal for any further development. We live in a conservation area, and buildings to either side that were not mentioned have been given the status of listed buildings of local importance. That makes this even more pertinent. Any massing or bulk, which you will see in some of the pictures, will be detrimental. And again, the idea is that we should be putting residents first, but this proposal puts the commercial interest of the small minority ahead of commercial interest of the majority. Now, with reference to inconsistencies that we have with the plan, number 1, the right of light, where the report states that it is not considered to be significant. We categorically dispute this. You have several photos in front of you, the blue photos that will help, but also we need to actually understand why the planning officer did not insist on an overshadowing diagram. How does the officer know it is not significant, especially when the sun is lower during the spring, high late summer, etc.? An overshadowing diagram shows overshadowing during different hours of the day and each season. There is absolutely no proper frame of reference. This is a major omission. Secondly, noise pollution, section 7.18 of the proposed plan. The report claims that the proposal will not adversely impact neighbourhood enjoyment and use of garden. This is a very, very narrow view of both noise pollution and pollution itself. which is already causing poor living conditions for neighbours and invades personal privacy and security, including into some people's bathrooms. The report fails to acknowledge concerns raised in our various objection letters and conversations with the planning office, including number 1, uneasiness using the patio area to the rear of number 14 and the gardens of Carew Lodge because of the constant noise from the nursing home, clattering of kitchen equipment, noise from residents who randomly walk the garden singing in a rather loud and disinhibited fashion, as well as residents that cry out from pain from time to time. This is often intimidating and very intrusive. Secondly, many of us actually have to shut our windows on hot days to try and avoid this noise. And thirdly, this home is on one of the very few main access routes to the station and the school. There is already huge significant traffic congestion and pollution, and this will only be exacerbated. So quite simply, any type of increased capacity will exacerbate this to an unacceptable degree, especially when you also consider, and the point was made earlier, that many of the patients unfortunately suffer from mental illness, which makes it actually even harder to control noise, as we know because we live with that every day. On the understanding that the population is around, I think, 19 or 20, and the plan is to add 4 rooms, depending on whether they're single or double rooms, this increases capacity somewhere between 20 to 40%. This is unacceptable for us. Thirdly, many questions we have not received answers to. I noticed the light has gone amber. I will just give you a small sample. There's been some illegal drilling from number 12 into number 14 over the last weeks. We have requested what's going on, structures being erected, no response from anybody. Secondly, we asked for another site visit. Apparently there was another site visit, but the site visit did not certainly include number 14 or ourselves. Thirdly, we don't understand why the design and heritage statement that's submitted welcome to the plans. Fourthly, we believe there's been some illegal development of that property before. And fifthly, even the planning notice was so obscure that half the neighbourhood didn't even realise until we started the petition. So basically, our request is full and categoric refusal of any further development. Thank you.
Okay. Do members have any questions? No? Okay, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Is the agent, applicant or the agent here for this one? Do you wish to speak? Yep. Would you like to come forward?
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Dipesh Shah. I'm acting on behalf of the applicant. Eastbury Nursing Home has been established for well over 30 years and provides a critical service to Hillingdon Council and local NHS services. The home currently offers acute care for up to 20 residents with lounge and day rooms to ease the pressures of daily life. The existing property has over the years been piecemeal extended, which the previous speaker has mentioned, and in our opinion, the ad hoc developments do not give justice to the arts and craft style of architecture. Internally, the nursing home has one major flaw, that the facilities are not fully accessible. The applicant, following years of successful dialogue with the local National Health Service, has been praised in the service that it offers at this home, but a few years ago this was turned around and was told that a lift had to be provided to ensure that the residents can access the entire building. As a result, the applicant took the opportunity to replan the ground floor and the first floor to insert a lift. In doing so, this provided the opportunity to unify the rear and consolidate the ad hoc extensions developed as mentioned previously. We have worked very hard with the planning department and especially Hillingdon's council conservation officer to provide a holistic design that best suited the site, taking into consideration the conservation area and architectural detailing presented on the original building. The original scheme had 2 first floor wing extensions to provide 4 additional rooms and an internal lift. This was considered that the extension detracted from the visual amenity from the host property at the rear. With the dialogue between us and the planning team, the first floor wing extensions have been lowered to provide a sympathetic addition to the large detached property. This will provide essential circulation of all floors by way of the lift, and now three single additional rooms to ensure that the care home continues to provide an indispensable oversubscribed service to the local National Health Service and Hillingdon Council. The issues and concerns raised by the previous speaker, namely rights of light, the noise, traffic impact. Obviously, rights of light to some extent they're not really a planning concern at this stage. Noise, apart from obviously patients using the garden space occasionally, the mental state obviously is debatable and a subjective view. So, in our opinion, these concerns can be dismissed and not objectable matters from a planning context. The principal matters were picked up by the planning and conservation officer relating to design, and have been deliberated and successfully designed out to provide a development that removes the mismatched rear extensions to consolidate them to provide a development that best suits the locally listed building and informs the conservation area setting in line with Hillingdon Council planning policies and development framework. It is therefore with the aforementioned that this submission warrants full backing for approval by the planning committee. Thank you.
Do members have any questions? I have one in a moment, but do members have any others? No. You passed a brief comment on lights, which will take us into overshadowing territory, I'm certain, at some point in this conversation later on. What work have you done in that area?
Other than looking at neighbouring properties, now the property, if you're in the back garden, the property on the right hand side, I can't remember the actual name, but the property is set away with a side alleyway. As the planning department already mentioned, it's heavily dense landscaping boundary condition on there, and the property on that right hand side is set away from that sort of party wall fence line. On the opposite side, where you've got a property quite close to the boundary edge, again, as it was mentioned earlier, the sort of 2/3 of the front part of that property is there are no windows effectively, and then the latter part of the rear of that dwelling, there are, I don't think from memory there are any windows. If anything, it's an obscure window which assumes it might be a bathroom, not a habitable room.
No hands raised, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I've got ward council. Councillor Seaman Digby.
I thought it was done for me. Thank you. The previous speaker mentioned the criticality of the service, which is an irrelevance under planning requirements. It's almost as irrelevant as the fact that the service operator of that home is in special measures with a QCC for another home in the area. That also is irrelevant from a planning point of view. I mean, I find it quite embarrassing, and personally, and for the council, that we've got paid officers who are seeking to justify this application. It's not our place as a council to find a suitable scheme for applicants. You know, this is a site, and the pictures will demonstrate here with the new roof line, which is already squeezed in at the margins. I mean, it's completely squeezed into a tiny residential site. I get what they want to do, but it's detrimentally over-dominant, and it totally imposes upon its neighbours. The fact that a light study hasn't been done is just, again, equally embarrassing. Why on earth wouldn't it have been done? Because if it was me trying to get this through, you'd do everything you could to make sure you proved the case. If you look at the new roof line, which is basically a roof line which takes you over, which we understand is an illegal development that was done without planning permission in 1988 to 1990. There is no planning permission for this thing they're building over the top of. This shows, and you've got it in front of you, this shows the new roof line. This is massively over-dominant on that small, tiny site. I get that the noise pollution possibly can be mitigated, possibly can be controlled, but at the moment it isn't, and residents have complained, it's on record. They've complained about that. Nobody wishes to harm the people that are there being looked after. But if you increase the population, it will be harder to control. People should have a right to enjoy their homes and their gardens. This is not people being NIMBY. This has clearly been there for 30 years. If we did it from scratch, we wouldn't allow it to be in that residential area to this extent. But if you look at all of the pictures, and they're quite subjective when you see the officer's picture of the previous scheme, which is done in dark, and the new massive scheme done in light, so therefore straight away visually it's a trick. Straight away you look at it and it looks smaller because it's white against black. I mean, it just does. It's completely unslick and unprofessional, but if it was me, that's what I'd do. But you can see it on there, the bulk and density of the current scheme against the last one, whatever you say about returns and walls and roofs, is a huge overbearing structure with much higher roofs that impedes upon this development. The site's been told it's at its maximum development potential now. That's how we should leave it, and we should reinforce that by refusing this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions from members? No. Just in case, I just cover all bases. I also have a note from another of the ward councillors, Councillor Lewis, who says, I wish it to be noted by committee that I strongly oppose the above reference planning application due to the plan scale and volume, which I believe is far too large and accordingly inappropriate development of the site. I would also comment members undertook a site visit to this site last Friday, so therefore I have actually seen it at ground level. And with that, I will open debate. Councillor Oswald, you first to indicate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, it was useful, the site visit, so I'm glad that we did that. I just have a couple of things. That picture that's on the screen at the moment, above the roof on the application site there is a peak, which is, I believe, is Carew Road, is it? Property, Carew Lodge.
Yep, I believe
and there was a window in there. Do we know what the distance is between that window and the proposed development? That's my first question. And my other point is what you said earlier, Chairman, loss of light. And I think that in a lot of cases that's important. And I don't know whether a light study's been done for this. The photographs that we've got here on the blue papers that were given to us shows some grass suffering slightly, probably from lack of sunlight, I suspect. So that's just two things for the moment, Chairman.
Do you want to start, James?
If I can help on committee with one of those points, and as actually an additional condition I'd like to propose to committee that might help on regarding an issue that the petitioner raised. So the inspector in 2011, and obviously there's been reference this evening to the inspector's decision, the inspector was satisfied on neighbour impact but dismissed because of the impact on the building and the surrounding conservation area and the street scene. So that's important because it is a material planning consideration. So we need to take in context that inspectors previously looked at a certain massing and not had concerns regarding impacts on neighbours, including light outlook, etc. So I think members are slightly hampered. It's not quite as straightforward on that particular issue. One of the points the first petitioner mentioned was to do with noise, and there is something that we could do to perhaps help address that issue. If there was a condition requiring a noise management scheme that effectively required the applicant to explain to the council mitigation measures they could implement, basically because it is a nursing home, there may be, to give an example, how they install alarm systems when people, when residents of the property have issues. There's actually, I would suspect there's actually various measures that could be explored that might help the occupiers of neighbouring properties if they are suffering from noise disturbance from the existing use on site. And if members were to approve this extension, I think we could add a condition, if members are happy to delegate the final wording to me, that would help to some extent on that. But hopefully, given my slightly long-winded response, Amanda's able to answer you on the first part of your question, Councillor.
So the window you're referring to is a third floor window which is obscure glazed, and if you turn to page 63 of your plan pack, the plans on the screen, I would refer to them, but they're not overly clear. So on page 63, the ground floor plan shows the application site on the top of the picture, and then the line of the adjoining property along the bottom. So there isn't a great deal of separation, albeit there is a approximately 3 metre high brick wall between the two properties there. Now, in terms of how much closer it is to the new proposal, was that the question you'd asked?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was.
It's not actually any closer because of the rear elevation. The pitch just increases on the... So that's the existing rear elevation and that part of the building. So when it's increased in height, it's the pitch that increases as opposed to any built form being closer to that window or to that building. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of sunlight?
Lots of sunlight, yeah, which was... I think the head of planning kind of answered that.
He did. So the planning inspectorate deemed that there would be no unacceptable reduction in the levels of natural light, and that was from the previous scheme. So it's very difficult to see how this scheme would now create a loss of light. And the rights to light that's been mentioned is a civil issue.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The reason I asked that was because of the petitioner's comments.
Yeah, I'll help committee. I'm quoting from the 2011 appeal decision, and I'll just read the paragraphs. I think it's relevant. Bear in mind, this one is now a little bit smaller than this is a smaller scheme. I am satisfied, however, this roof arrangement, combined with the presence of a tall boundary hedge, would not lead to an unacceptable reduction in the levels of natural light currently available to number 14. Given that the side elevation of the first floor addition does not contain any windows and external staircase could be screened, I consider adequate levels of privacy would be retained for the occupiers of the neighbouring dwelling. And obviously, as the head of planning has reminded you, that is a material consideration you've got to have in your mind. Because obviously if the planning inspector's referenced it once, he will reference it again. Councillor Higgins, I hadn't forgotten you, I'm just dealing with the points ahead of me.
Just try, so eager. Can the officer please put up the comparison between the two proposals?
Previous refused and this one, you mean?
Yeah, the next one. Yeah. Go back one. Right, that one. I think, to be honest, I'm going to propose a refusal for this one, I'm afraid, but on bulk. I mean, as you can see, the two drawings there, the current proposal looks more overwhelming than the previous proposal. I mean, it's just obvious. I really am astounded why we haven't. We used to have it in our pack on situations where we wanted shadowing. We used to have the whole diagram and it was put forward to the committee and we could look at it properly. Now we're guessing. Now, was the proposal looked at as it currently by the applicant for overshadowing, or was it in the forward thinking of this development? And I think it will be the latter rather than this one. I don't think they've answered the questions of bulk. I think it's still too big for the site. I also think I'm really disturbed that there's not in this report about how they want to mitigate noise pollution. There is an issue here. It's been ongoing for many, many years. You would have thought the applicant would come back with something, and it's all well and good officers saying, well, we can put a condition on it after the fact, but we should be doing this before. So those my two reasons for refusal. Okay, well that's for me, and others to support. If they don't want to support, that's fine. But that's where I stand on this one. Thank you.
I'll come back to noise, and I suspect the advice we will strongly get from left and right of me in a moment will be that if we can condition it, we're not able to refuse on something that's conditionable, which, as you know, is the standard position. I'll open up the bulk. You've started the bulk debate, Councillor Higgins, so I'll open that one up to explore, because that's where this may go. Councillor Dillon?
I'm afraid I agree 100% with Councillor Higgins. I was going to mention both of those issues, and conditioning noise. I don't know how you can condition noise when there's disturbance in a garden, and how you can mitigate someone screaming in a garden out loud. Or
I would reference a number of schemes we've seen both here and on, in fact, on this committee, where we've had, for example, children's day nurseries is the other example, and they have been in residential settings, and there has been noise mitigation. So it is. There are potential ways to do it.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it works.
It'd be wrong for me to imply that suddenly means that there's no noise disturbance, but there could be measures that are installed. So we could, through the condition, force the applicant to employ a noise consultant to then come up with a scheme of measures, whether that's insulating rooms, whether it's acoustic fencing. There's a whole raft of things that could be brought into play, but at the end of that, you'd have some improvements with the outcome.
Okay. Can I just look at bulk for a minute, because I think
Yeah. And in terms of bulk, obviously the roof line has been brought down, so the pitch there's less pitch. But I do agree with Councillor Higgins that the flank walls now create a look of more bulk, which I find it looks bigger than the previous scheme that was dismissed to me.
Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Chairman. Are we able to get any sort of sense from officers on figures around bulk? Because otherwise, as Councillor Higgins says, all we've got to really go on is these pictures which are in front of us. And from that, the front of the building actually looks very similar to what was there previously. It's the back, the rear end, that looks like the bulk is being quite significantly increased. So are we able to get any sort of dimensions at all from officers?
But I'll add another question to that. To which side are we currently looking at? Does this face Eastbury Road or Carew Lodge? Eastbury Road, I'm taking it. Is it 10 Eastbury Road? Well, which one is this one that we're looking at here?
Sorry, Eastbury, number 14.
Yeah, right. I just wanted to check I had the right orientation, that was all. Officers are just checking, in line with the member's question, whether if we've got any information on bulk or bulk reductions. Anybody else got any comments on bulk on this one? Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm inclined to concur with my colleague Councillor Higgins on this. Even looking at the other side of the property on the Carew Lodge, it does look like it's an overdevelopment on bulk. I wasn't, unfortunately, able to go to the site visit, but from these diagrams and these views that we're supposed to make our judgment, it does look like it's overdevelopment, and for that I'm inclined to refuse this application.
The only comment I would make, having done the site visit, is obviously the Carew Lodge side. We're flank wall to flank wall, so there's in reality you've got to think about that. Obviously on the other side there is, but what was it refused for last time out? Preserve or enhance adequate outlook living conditions supported. Okay.
I can confirm that the depth of this extension has been reduced by 1.7 metres, so that's on this blank elevation. That was one of the questions that was asked with regard to the bulk and scale.
7 metres down on which bit?
Sorry, in.
Coming in. What about height-wise? How far down does that come?
In terms of height, this scheme is slightly different insofar as the height is retained, but the pitch of this roof has been increased from that which was refused, which reduces a quantum of flank elevation. So the set back of 1.7 metres, along with the reduction in the flank quantity because of the additional ridge, has reduced what was the problem in the past, or the appeal inspector's concerns about the bulk of that flank elevation. But again, that's a judgment.
I think it isn't. The roof line is where is the roof line in relation to what it was before?
The same.
To the roof.
Yes, we can fudge around these issues. The fact is, you look at that drawing there, regardless whether it's the first roof line that's coming down or the rear roof line, it still gives the impression of overdevelopment. And that's the issue that I have with this. Is you can't, we can, you know, whether the roof, the brickwork is higher or it's lower, the still thing, it still looks overdevelopment. You can see that if you take the chimney, for example, on the current proposal, and you take the chimney on the dismissed proposal, you can see how much that area above the roof is just filled in. It's just too much, especially in that area, anyway.
I'm sorry, I'm just quickly reflecting the appeal decision to make sure we're not... Perhaps the head of planning might offer us... Do you want to circulate that, James? Will that add to a debate or not?
As we're at this end of the table referring to an appeal decision members don't have in front of them, I do actually have some printed copies.
Let's just have a look. Let's just make sure members have got that as well, please.
I appreciate the points that everyone's raised about it looking like it's an increased quantum of bulk, but it is a perception. This is perceived to be a better design by the council's conservation team, but it's a judgment that's been made set against the points raised in the appeal inspector's decision and the design that's probably more appropriate than the last one that was refused.
So the key conclusion from the last appeal decision was, and I think this is where we end up, gentlemen, is that the last 17, gentlemen and ladies, the extension would harm the overall character and appearance of the appeal property. It would fail to preserve or enhance the appearance of the conservation area and unduly harm the outlook from 14 Eastbury Road. So the exam question therefore is, are you satisfied in line with the officer recommendations that has now been overcome, or do we now believe that still exists? So that I think is where it comes down to. I think much of the rest of it, if I'm reading the appeal decision correctly, and I'm sure the legal team will correct me if I'm wrong, is the appeal inspector has accepted some of the other issues. So Councillor Duke, you haven't had a say, so I'll be democratic.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Castro, yeah.
I think in summary, I would be curious to see if I get agreement on this. What this implies is there are minor tweaks and, if anything, reductions. What I'm seeing there, and I appreciate this is not a verified piece, but what I'm seeing here and there is...
I would have great...
I appreciate that, but...
Yeah, those were circulated without knowledge, so I would be very cautious about basing your judgment on those, please. They've not been verified, so... I certainly wouldn't wish to base an appeal, a refusal reason around those, because that, I just want to be very careful.
That is just one of my points. So the point is that this implies minor, that which is our own, our own...
That is ours, so...
Yeah, and that seems to refute what this is saying here. So I would agree with what's already been said, and I'd like to see if we can put it to a vote, possibly.
Well, yeah, I need to make sure first, bear in mind this is likely to be appealed, I need to make sure first, with sustainable refusal reasons, that we've properly evidenced. Otherwise, you've seen recent appeal decisions. If they're not properly documented as to why we've done it and what we've done, we will get a result we don't want. Councillor Catcher, you were on the site visit. So you've had the opportunity of seeing this place up.
Thank you very much. While we were on the site visit, we constantly had similar concerns and questions while we were there, saying, how does the window work? Because the window was, although it was higher, but it was still a concern. And also, you're absolutely right, the bulk of the extension is going at the back, right? But we still was concerned where it's going to meet up with the roof, and that is going to become a concern. We talked about it, but you can't really see it. Now you see it physically there on the drawing. It does look like, it's quite bulky. That's just my, sums, and I do agree with what has been said. Thank you.
Okay. Am I getting a consensus? Sorry, Councillor Dillon. sorry, yeah, go on. And then I'm going to move.
Yes, Chairman, you are getting a consensus.
I think I am. I just want to sense we've made our grounds out.
I think the scheme currently, in its current form, is not too dissimilar to what was dismissed. There is an issue with bulk, so I'm going to move.
Before you do, can I just stall you for 10 seconds?
Indeed.
In order that the head of planning might give you some useful guidance that you would find helpful.
In 2011, there was a refusal reason that referred to size, salting, bulk, excessive depth, visually intrusive, unneighbourly, and that was to do with neighbour impact, and the inspector didn't have a problem with that, but the inspector did have a problem. But when this is where I'll revert to the wording that I've got a feeling members may like some of this. The inspector did agree with the design and visual impact, bearing in mind it's a locally listed building in a conservation area. The inspector said by reason of its overall size scale, bulk sighting, length of projection, design and appearance would represent an incongruous and visually intrusive form of development which would fail to harmonise with the architectural composition, character, proportions and appearance of the main building. It would appear overly bulky and as such would have a detrimental impact on the character and visual amenities of the surrounding area generally, and on the character and appearance of the locally listed building in the Northwood Frithwood Conservation Area, and then the relevant planning policies.
Okay. I'll take Councillor Oswald. That sounds to me as if it encompasses the concerns members have. I would ask the final word be delegated to head of planning to ensure that obviously we get the appropriately referenced planning policies if there have been any changes.
So all I would add is a line describing what the proposal is, then followed what I've just read out, and then ensure we have the up-to-date planning policy.
Yeah, that's fine. I just didn't want it to copy and paste and then we get the wrong ones and get told off. Councillor Oswald, you did indicate, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. That's exactly what he was going to say. Yeah. It's okay. All I wanted to say, Chairman, was that having read the inspector's report from last time, the overall conclusions on page 3, what's changed? I don't see that anything has changed. If this is approved, this is going to be one lump of a building, which is, if it was standalone, fine, but it isn't. I mean, all right, I'll leave it there. I think I'm getting a nod from the legal team that is good. I'm quite happy to move refusal. Right.
Move or second?
I don't mind. I mean, I think Jazz wants to move it. I will second it. I have no problem with that.
Well, I don't mind who does something.
B19, B20, and B. Is one of those.
Yeah, well, we'll let the head of planning tidy the wording up, please, because I don't want to get
I will
trapped.
second it, and Councillor Denham.
Okay. Right, where we've reached is that the proposal before us is that the officer recommendation is overturned. This one is refused for the one reason outlined by the head of planning, with the final wording to be delegated to the head of planning to ensure that we have the right description and also the right planning policies to support it. All those in favour of refusal on that basis, please clearly shout. I think that's refused. Good. Right, I'm there. Another one we can do, yeah. Nice. Right, can I do item 7, Midhurst Cottage, High Road, East Coast.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 is Midhurst Cottage. The site comprises a detached property on the north side of High Road with the principal elevation facing southeast. The application is seeking planning permission for a 2-storey rear extension. I would just note that whilst the application is for a 2-storey rear extension, planning permission has already been granted for a single-storey rear extension. So the only real development that should be considered by, or I would suggest is considered by members, is the first floor rear extension. If I take you through the existing plans, this is the existing development on the screen. Apologies for the quality of the photos, but hopefully your plan pack is a little bit clearer. Okay, so it's members who need to see the images, and so members have plan packs before them, but there are clearer plans, should you wish to see them, which can be circulated, which have been printed off. So these are the existing floor plans of the property with the roof plan at the end. The property will be extended, you can see here, at ground floor level, and that already has planning permission. At first floor level, the extension is set off this elevation and does not project anywhere near as far as the ground floor extension. This is demonstrated by the roof plan, which projects just in that section of the roof. Just to provide some context, the road does not have a uniform line of buildings, and that was primarily the reason that permission was granted for a 6-metre deep rear extension. So I'm going to try my very best to demonstrate through the pointer that the adjoining property's rear elevation is here. This is the application site, and the neighbouring property, it has a 2-storey rear extension up to here. So there is a variation in the building line along this site, and it's demonstrated further in some of the application photos. These are the existing and proposed elevations of the site, and the existing and proposed elevations, so front and rear. So you can see that the extension on the rear is only set to the right-hand side. I take you through some photographs. This is the existing front elevation and its alignment with the neighbouring properties, just here and here. It's not as easy to see. Well, this picture probably does demonstrate the way in which the building lines are staggered along the front and the rear. There are some clearer photos coming up, so that you can see that there is a clear projection of that property forward of the application site. And this is on the other side, so the garage itself projects beyond the front elevation of the application site. This is an image taken from the back of the application site, looking towards, let's get the address right, it's the property on the left. So this would be Long Meadow. So you can see that that property has a double-storey rear projection up to here, with a further projection on its other side, which is essentially what this application would also deliver on the application site. So it would be 2 stories of built form projecting from this flank wall outwards. That's the rear garden of the application site, and this shows the flank elevation of the application site and a single-storey conservatory which exists at the adjoining property, which is Winstay. Sorry. So if you can just see this built form here, that is the rear elevation of the application site, so you can see the staggered building line with the adjoining property just here. So they are all very different in their variations, hence the reason that the application only proposes a first floor rear projection where it adjoins this property, because it has no impact on the application, on the adjoining properties in terms of amenity, overlooking or overbearing. We'll take you through some more photographs. Sorry about some of the picture quality, which is why we try to get as many as possible. Again, this shows the relationship of Winstay and the application site, which is set that much further back, and that's the flank elevation of the property on the other side. The application is seeking planning permission for a 2-storey rear extension, albeit the ground floor rear extension already has planning permission. So I would urge members just to consider the first floor rear extension, which projects a maximum depth of 4 metres at ground floor level. The scheme has been through numerous revisions at various points, and the planning department have sought in every way we can to provide updated consultation to neighbouring residents to inform them that the application drawings have changed. It's regrettable that due to the number of changes, the consultation has left some confusion amongst residents, and that wasn't the intention of the council. The intention was for the planning department to be as open as possible with regard to the revisions that had been received. We have sought to negotiate what is deemed to be an acceptable and policy compliant scheme. The application is accordingly recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker on this one, Professor Ward.
This is the second planning application in less than 4 months regarding this property and was made only 4 weeks after approval was given for a 6-metre deep single-storey rear extension and before any building work has commenced. We are convinced that submitting consecutive planning applications in this way will achieve a larger extension than the council would permit if made in one application and will result in overdevelopment, which we have experienced twice recently in our immediate vicinity. Firstly, in the case of Langside in Uxbridge Rise, council minutes of the 15th of September 2015 concluded that each application was considered to be acceptable individually, but that in combination this would amount to overdevelopment. Secondly, submissions to increase occupancy were made for Frank Walsh Court in Damer Gardens when building was well underway, and this project has had serious detrimental effects for occupants of both Larkswood Rise and Damer Gardens. 33 of our neighbours have signed a petition opposing this extension to Midhurst Cottage, which shows the depth of feeling against these very large extensions which are out of keeping with the surrounding area. These houses were built so they were staggered at both front and back, and this will no longer be the case if this development to Midhurst Cottage goes ahead. There were several inaccuracies in the drawing and statements of this application which call into question the accuracy of the rest of the application and of the completed building. Firstly, the distance from the existing wall to the Long Meadow boundary is 1.6 metres and not 1.9 metres. This was not corrected until the latest plan dated the 12th of January 2018, and we wonder if a 6-metre deep ground floor extension would have been allowed if this had actually been accurate. Secondly, it was stated that trees and hedges would not be affected, although there is dense planting on both sides of the garden, including large trees adjacent to Wednesday and a viburnum hedge next to Long Meadow. We are pleased that the planning officer has made provision to perfect these in his report. We believe this proposed extension will overshadow the garden and outside seating area of Long Meadow in the morning, and no formal LBH light test has been done to assess this. Twice, the chairman of Northwood Hills Residents Association has written to the planning officers requesting them to confirm that loss of light impacts to the rear of the neighbouring property, Long Meadow, and garden have been assessed using the council's software programme. No response has been received, which, as well as being discourteous, perhaps implies this has not been done. We believe this is important as the lounge area patio area at Long Meadow while northwest facing. I can show indicative evidence, but not verified, of these photos that I have here. We question why 6 metres depth was allowed for the ground floor when the planning advice for residential extensions here is 4 metres and it should be subordinate to the main house, which it's not. We feel this should now be reconsidered in view of this application for a second storey. The bulk mass of 4 metres deep second storey, as requested, will increase the impact considerably. In addition, the plan shows 3 first-floor windows on the side adjacent to Long Meadow, which will overlook the property and compromise its privacy. One of these is for a bedroom, which already has 2 bedrooms, and we question why these windows cannot be increased in size rather than adding a 3rd window overlooking the adjacent property. We therefore request that the application for the first floor and ground floors are considered as a whole to prevent overdevelopment, that the proposed size is refused, and the 3rd window on the left elevation is not allowed. However, if these plans are approved, we request the permitted development rights are removed, and it is stated conditions that all windows, bathrooms, shower rooms or bedroom on the side elevations are obscured or frosted grass permanently for the lifetime of the building and non-opening below a height of 1.8 metres. And finally, we request that a party wall agreement is mandated due to the close distance, less than 3 metres, between the properties, and the applicant pays for the neighbouring properties' cost to employ independent surveyors both before and after the development has been completed. We sincerely hope that the planning committee on this occasion will put the interests of the residents first. Thank you very much.
Do members have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone here on behalf of the agent or the applicant looking to speak? Nope. In that case, Councillor Bianco, it's down to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Always a pleasure. be here, and always nice to have a chance to speak to the committee. This is, as the residents have just outlined, is of great concern, and one of my biggest concerns is this what seems to be serial application syndrome. The ink was barely dry on the first consent before the next one came in. So there was no doubt that that was the original intention. It's not that they suddenly got the consent and thought, oh, I'll tell you what, why don't we try for a first floor? This was all along. I wonder if this is passed tonight, whether we can expect a further application tomorrow morning for the conversion, I don't know, extension of the roof, for example, and to be turned into another 3 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms or something. Obviously, that isn't something we can legislate for as such, although the suggestion that if this is approved, that PD rights are removed is a very good one, and I would certainly support that, as I would support the obscure glazing issues as far as the side windows go. Now, there have been changes, as the officer pointed out, to the application during the course of its move through planning, and the officer, I noticed, mentioned that it wasn't the aim of the council to confuse residents, but I do wonder if it was the aim of the applicant. And I think by keep changing the application as it goes along, whilst I do appreciate that there is an element of negotiation that goes on, and therefore any applicant keen to get their application through is bound to try to tweak things as they go along, it isn't helpful at all to local residents, and one does wonder how one is supposed to carry out an effective consultation if that is the case. Now, I see the yellow light is on. There is no doubt, however, I have a great deal of sympathy for the people who live next door, particularly the impact of the light, and secondly, the bulk. So I think if there was an opportunity to take against this application, I hope that those two would perhaps count significantly. But as I said, but I think the more, if we do pass this, the more impediments we can place in the path of any future application, which I suspect is literally round the corner, the better. Thank you.
Any questions for the councillor? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Bianca. I'm just going to cover a couple of matters briefly. Residents were raising a question, and this doesn't, by the way, determine which way we're going with this. I just want to clarify a few things off before we start. Obscure glazing is condition 5, and removal of PD rights is condition 9. So both those matters are covered. Regrettably, party wall agreements are not something that the planning process covers, and therefore I can't drag us into those. There is an informative that advises people, but it is not part of the planning process. Key issues for this one are the first floor. We are looking at this application as it stands, but bear in mind we refuse this tonight, they can still build the ground floor. That we don't withdraw that ground floor permission. So as the officer indicated, and I would direct members to consider the first floor only, because actually the ground floor can be built tomorrow and no one can stop you. Right, so who wants to take me out? Councillor Osborne, you indicated, Councillor Higgins, you indicated. I'll start left.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, thanks for the petition, and in the petition it was mentioned about loss of light. Well, it's northwest facing, I think, this Midhurst cottage, according to this plan, so there'd probably be 2 hours loss of light in the summer. Well, in the past we've found that that's been allowed, because that's not...
Gotters have got some overshadow work that they have done.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in the past, Chairman, we've accepted 2 hours as acceptable. If it was all afternoon or all morning, well, then we'd have to have a serious look at it, I think. But so that's that issue. And the other issue is that this report says approval. And that's all we can... Well, that's what we're faced with. We're looking at this report. It's compliant. It's in policy. So that's what we've got to make our minds up about. And it's the double story. I'm not concerned with the single story. I know that's got permission, so I'm not even going to mention that again. It's just a double story, and it's in policy and it's compliant. So if it's going to be refused, then you're going to have to come up with some pretty good reasons to refuse it. I'll leave it there for now, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins, are you going to help with that process or not?
I wish I could. I will have a go.
You're going to try. You're going to give it a whirl.
The issue for me, and it's the question that I'm not allowed to ask, really.
Don't ask it then.
The question is that if this application, as the petitioner said, if this application had come before us with both floors in there, I would have a feeling that we would refuse that.
You can't take me down that road.
Let me finish. The point here is that yes, we have to take the first floor. We can't change the first floor issue, but we can take it into account. And if you build on top of a wall and make it bigger, then the bulk does take over. You know, this committee knows well my feelings on this, and Councillor Bank has just mentioned it, is this constant playing.
I know your view,
and I'm not, and it is outrageous.
I may have some sympathy with your view, but I cannot take it into account.
I appreciate that, but maybe it is a time on record, to say on record, that we should be looking at this, because maybe there should be, you're allowed to make an application, if it's approved, you get 6 months before you can approve again. That would stop a lot of this nonsense, but that's another day.
National planning policy framework, I would suggest is worth.
I would have to be a magician to turn this committee around to get this to refuse it, and I couldn't.
And you're not a magician tonight.
I agree with the PD rights, which is already a thing. Windows. The opening of windows, that wasn't...
They are obscured later.
I know they're obscured, but the opening...
The opening is also in condition 5, I think.
Just to make sure that... Because you didn't say it before, that's...
It is there.
And with a heavy heart, I'd have to...
Okay, well, let me work down the table, see if anybody else got any other bright ideas. Councillor Flynn, then Councillor Duku. And sorry, I think it was the other way round, but I will...
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yes, I largely agree with Councillor Higgins really on this. One has to be realistic, unfortunately. However, I mean, I would just say it's a great shame. I think I remember sitting on the committee when we heard this first time around, and I think it was actually quite a close decision on the one-storey extension. So that obviously has happened, and we're now looking at 2 stories. I would just like to ask officers, the second floor that we're being asked to look at first floor we're being asked to look at this evening, how does that compare in terms of bulk with the Long Meadow extension? Because is it exactly the same bulk, or is there any increase compared to Long Meadow?
Perhaps we could put the photos back up, and then Mandic can talk.
I'll show you this from this plan. You can actually see that the 2-storey projection that we were looking at on some of the photos, and I'll go back to the photo now, is here, and that's Long Meadow. So the 2-storey projection does not go that much further as part of the proposal. So I can take you to the photograph if that's easier. There we go. So it would project further, but not far enough to obstruct the light to this rear elevation window. But that is Long Meadow, and the rear extension will go beyond that.
By how much?
Don't. Bear with me, I'll have a look by how much.
Held, Councillor. Oh, Councillor Duke, sorry, I almost forgot you. My apologies entirely.
Sorry, can I just get clarification? So you're saying it goes beyond
the
building?
I'm asking for that to be checked, but I'm just moving on. I'm not forgetting anybody. Go on.
Well, I might be slightly jumping the gun, but sort of in summary, I think this is one of these classic examples of, do we like it? No. Does it actually breach any of the parameters that we can seriously object and wouldn't be overturned at appeal? No. So, I think, I'm going to have to go with officers' recommendations again, as you said, with a heavy heart.
Well, the head of planning is going to
give a slightly blunter summary. I think with this application, you can either approve it with 9 conditions, and I think we've covered all the possible options we could have in terms of planning conditions, or let it be allowed to appeal, which is what I think would happen, and then you run the serious risk that a lot of those conditions could be removed by an appeal inspector. That's the actual reality here.
Okay, Councillor Dillon.
Did you move that? I think Councillor Duduku moved it. I'll second it.
Okay, all right. Were we done? Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's 1 point outstanding. Sorry, I wasn't ignoring. I wasn't expecting that to come up.
It projects 2 metres beyond the existing rear elevation of that wall, but obviously there is a separation between the two properties.
Okay, that answers that question. I think 2 metres is probably we're going to struggle with that. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you
got
very
any
much,
revolutionary
Mr.
wisdom?
Very quickly. It is one of those that I can totally concur with the residents that I could see this as being one of these creep extensions that they'll start off with partial first floor, then in 6 months' time we'll see the rest being extended, then maybe into the roof. But unfortunately, with the planning rules as they are, we have to look at the current plans in front of us, and as Councillor Duduku had already said, it's a horrible thing, but there's nothing there that we can actually bite onto to turn around and say, no, we're against it. Unfortunately, with a very, very heavy heart, there's nothing we can do.
Okay, I think that's the general consensus before me. It is proposed and seconded. Therefore, all those in favour of approving the officer report, please clearly show. 2, 3, that's everybody. So that one's approved. All right. I move to the last item of the night, St Martin's House, the runway rise slip. There is no petition on this one. It is conversion of an office to residential with some additions, but that's the broad scope of it.
Thank you, Chairman. St Martin's House on the runway is an application which involves extending and altering the existing office building to create a 3-storey flat roof building containing 9 residential flats. So the runway is located along here. It has a very mixed character. Predominantly it had been commercial in use. Lots of the occupiers along the stretch have used their prior approval permitted development rights to convert from office to residential. For context, the station is just here. So it's very close in walking distance to public transport links. The application is only before members today because we are trying to secure a permit-free agreement for the existing and any future CPZ area to prevent any residents securing parking permits. So alongside this development, there is on-site parking for 12 vehicles servicing the 9 residential units. So whilst we consider it to be policy compliant, we are trying to ensure that there isn't an overspill onto the public highway. Accordingly, the application is recommended for approval, but I will take you through the plans because I just realised I haven't done that. So that's a better plan that shows you the station and its distance from the application site on the runway. So these are the existing elevations. It is a single-storey pitched roof commercial building which has fairly unsightly parking along its front elevation, which we have tried quite hard through this application to try and improve. So we've provided some more buffer planting along the frontage as part of the proposals, and undercroft parking is provided for the 12 vehicles. This is the layout of the first and second floor residential units, and that's a typical elevation, and then the amenity space at roof level, which has been set in from the roof lines. If we go to the plans, it's probably easy to show you that this is the existing property, the existing single-storey section with the pitched roof, and that's the site in context of the adjoining properties at number 2. And this is the application site and where it abuts the adjoining property there. So this is the beginning of the runway. So the commercial unit you can see just here is the commercial properties leading down from Rice Slip. Keep going forward. This is an example of an existing property that's been converted from office to residential. So the nature and character is changing, but also the bulk and scale and mass is reflective of what's proposed on the site. So there's a site at the end which is also 3 stories in height. And the application site adjoins this building here, so it's not that dissimilar in location. Accordingly, the application has been recommended for approval, subject to a legal agreement to remove the ability for future residents to secure parking permits.
and the wording of a couple of the conditions has been updated in the addendum. But the essence is still the same, but the wording. Right, views on this one. Oh, Councillor Higgins, I'll go you first.
I can't get a bloody word.
Well, you never can, will it?
Do we know what the business is that butts up to this proposal is? And are we, we've been down here before. If they're making noise and all that, we're not going to start. If they continue to have a business, we're not going to sort of penalise them so they have to go, are we?
No, I don't think.
That's what I mean by that. I'm just trying to say that if they're making noise now, like we did with the boatyard, remember?
Yeah, the boatyard was a slightly different.
Yeah, but it's still business. I mean, to be honest, here we go again, losing industrial. This country needs businesses, and here we go, losing it again to residential. Can't say any more than that.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. I'll move Officer recommendation.
Councillor Graham did want to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that my understanding is that they could do much of this by permitted development, and by having this before us and approving it with the conditions applying, it gives us more control over what will eventually,
in essence, yes,
be there. So I'm happy to second the.
Does anybody else have any other views on this one? No. All those in favour of approval, please clearly show. Thank you very much indeed. That one's approved. 8:15. We're done. Thank you.